Well, hey everybody, welcome back to The Breakdown. My name is Ron Humison. I'm your host, and not as always, Pastor Nick is not sitting across from me, if you're not watching online.
Yeah.
Instead, our student ministry director, Zechariah, I was trying to think of any other name that
any of them.
The student ministry director is joining me because Z preached on Sunday.
Yeah.
So we gave Nick the week off. We have no control over that.
Yeah. He gave himself the week off and said, "You're up, buddy."
That's exactly right.
But what's
up,
so
buddy?
awesome is we actually do this all the time.
Yes.
Me and you do this almost weekly. If you come in person and you're listening to The Breakdown, every week pretty much, if we're both here, we get on and host our live stream. For Sunday Live, we do a pre-service hosting segment where we launch our online viewers into the service, and we let them know, just like in person, as you're coming through the door, you have people that are greeting you. You have ways to get connected. You have a hub you can go to in person. And what we do online is we point them to that same thing. Which is so cool.
We really try to mimic that. And so it's funny because in this situation, when we host online, we are talking directly at the camera.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that one.
We talk to the camera.
Yeah.
We have handheld mics instead of
So
these
now
mics.
we get to stare into each other's pearly eyes.
Which we do actually do a lot. We do look over sometimes and look at each other while we're talking. But we already have that chemistry. We play off each other well. And if you've never watched online, some of the things that we talk about is one, we try to hit on our week a little bit. Especially if something's big has happened, we try to fill people in. But then we jump into like, hey, just like in person, there's a QR code in front of your seat wherever you're sitting. We give them that QR code on the screen for them to connect with us. We talk about how they can share the stream and invite people just like in person. We try to make it as similar because all the things that they can do are exactly what we're asking our people in person to do, just in a slightly different way, which is so cool.
So Sunday you preached. So first time preaching, right?
First time preaching on Sunday.
Would have
3
never
services.
known. Would have never known. Your sermon was lights out so well. So what I would love to do, what we've kind of started doing as recently as last week with Nick, is maybe for someone who doesn't attend church, maybe for someone who is yet to hear the sermon, because part of the heart of the breakdown is you don't have to listen to the sermon to get something from the breakdown, but it definitely helps, where we're coming from. Give the 2-minute synopsis, very quick rundown of what passage you preached from, kind of your point, because you definitely did 3 main points.
I did 3 main points.
Like let's start there and walk through those, and then I've got some volley questions for you.
So it kind of all came around in a weird way is where we were at. So Nick, when we were coming back from Passion, had asked me to preach. And I was like, heck yeah, I would love to preach on a Sunday morning. Then I come into his office a month or so later, and he's like, hey, when you preach, here's your date, June 23rd, which I'm like, man, one day after my birthday. It's perfect. Let's get it.
And then he said the passage.
And then he said, do you want to stay on topic with Genesis?
Oh, that's right.
Or do you want to go off on a one-off? And I was like, it's a lot easier. It is hard, but it's a lot easier to just be like, okay, here's the passage. Let me tackle this. Instead of me being like, man, I could teach on anything. There's so many options. So I was like, let's stay on topic. And this is what Nick then says. Nick says, okay, well, let's look at where we're going to be at. Dude, looks down his list. He's like, oh yeah, you're going to be in Genesis 9. And he's like, but I'm preaching on the first half the week before, which is the promise, which is the rainbow, never going to flood the earth. He's like, here's your second half. Noah's naked in his room. His son walks in his tent, and this is what you get to preach on, is his son's disgracing him.
Have fun, enjoy.
And he's like, here you go. And I'm like, wait, can I change my mind? I want to do the one-off now.
I'll take all the options.
Just give me, no. But I was like, okay. And immediately we were sitting there thinking like, okay, how do we gain something that's applicable to our lives today, here where we live in America, from them in that time period and the disgrace and stuff. And so here's where I really took it, and something that had been thrown around and something that had been on my heart, even from myself and Sean talking about. So if you don't know, me and Sean, we do one nights combined with middle school and high school this last year. And on all of our one nights, they were like big outreach nights, big invites. So we'd always do a gospel message. And so we would switch back and forth on who would teach. And when we'd get together and talk about like, okay, how do we want to present the gospel this time? And so one that had come up multiple times was the woman caught in adultery. And he was going to do it in March when we had our one night, and he ended up going a different direction with it. And so that kind of been on our heart that we'd been talking about. And so that's what came into my mind is like, man, just like Noah has been disgraced and embarrassed, we can look at how Jesus responds to a very similar issue and how he responds in love to the woman, just like the brothers respond in love. And so the points that we kind of broke down as we were working through the second half of Genesis 9 was hate. I can't even think of the first point. Hate, like,
yeah, I'm trying to think how you.
I don't even know how.
Or hate reveals sin.
Yes, like hate reveals sin, or hate opens sin, or hate like shows the sin.
Yep.
And so what the point of that was is like, as we see the Pharisees and as we see the scribes throw this woman at Jesus' feet, they're doing it for two different reasons of hate, and one we got into and one we didn't. One, they are so zealous about the law that they have forgotten the grace and the mercy that God has shown them. But then the second that we didn't get into was the hate they had for Jesus and how much they were using these situations to try to set Jesus up.
Yep.
And we didn't even get into that. There's three messages in that one little area. Hate exposes sin.
Yep.
There we go. That's the wording. And then our second point. So we looked at more on the John side, John chapter 8 side for that point.
Yep.
Because I don't think that necessarily, like when Noah's being exposed, I don't necessarily think there's not enough evidence or any verse that tells us that he was being exposed because of hate. It could have been because he was upset with his dad. It could have been anything. But I don't think his son hated him. I mean, he just helped save their whole family out of when everyone else died. But definitely in that John, there was hate against the woman because of their strong zeal for the law.
Yeah.
And there was hate against Jesus because Jesus was teaching the opposite, and they wanted to disrupt.
They're playing that gotcha moment where they're trying to catch him.
And something we talked about at Life Group even on Sunday was like, there's a really good chance that they set up this moment because you don't see them trying to stone the guy. Like it literally could have been that they had someone get with this lady who was probably questionable, and they could have paid a guy to get with her or told a guy to get with her just to set up Jesus.
Yeah.
Which then comes around and there's a whole ton of other problems about. I mean, that's pretty much rape at that point.
Yep.
But so that was the first point, and we stuck in John for that point, and then we talked about how love covers sin, and I love that. If you look in, I think it's 1 Peter, it talks about like above all, keep on loving because love covers all sin. And what we talked about, that love is Jesus's blood on the cross.
Yeah.
That's where that love stems out of, and the love that Jesus showed us on the cross, which then pours into us. That's the love that we can then outpour, and that's what covers the sin. And I wrapped it up at the end with that point is, yes, love covers sin, but love does not erase sin. Love does not erase the consequences of sin. But because Jesus' love, his blood on the cross covers that sin, we then get to spend eternity with him, which is what matters way more than some consequences here that might suck. Yeah. And then the third point, as we continued, is Jesus calls us to walk out of sin. And we went back to John chapter 8 for that one. And the point of that is Jesus tells this woman not only to like stand up, because if you haven't read that story in John chapter 8, I would encourage you, go read it. It starts in actually chapter 7, verse 53, and then bleeds on in through about 10 verses. And all these people are accusing this woman, and Jesus tells them, they're ready to stone her because that's what the law says. And he tells them, the one that has not committed a sin, or any of you that have never sinned, throw the first stone. And it says one by one they walk away, but it specifically says starting with the older, which is so cool to see that the older took responsibility, realized their wrongs, dropped. But those younger that might even be a little bit more zealous, they took a little bit more. But then they all walk away, and Jesus says, woman, has no one condemned you? And she says, no one, Lord. And he says, well, neither have I. And then he says, get up, go on, and sin no more. Yeah. And I think that's such a powerful moment, is where we see Jesus calling this woman to this thing, but then we also see the response of him on the cross and how he died for us, and we're called to the same thing. Is that, yes, he's paid, he's covered our sin, but that means we're not called to live in that sin. We need to, yes, get up out of our sin, but then go on and sin no more.
Yeah.
Don't fall into the same thing over and over again. And so that's kind of what we talked about. And we talked about how do we walk in love, which walking in love was the title of the message.
Yep.
How do we walk in love with one another so that people don't continue to fall into the same sin and same sin and same sin over and over again?
One of the things I appreciated about your message was you can play both sides where, like, we've all sinned, we've all fallen short. Like, we see that in Scripture. So there's that aspect of we are all sinners. Yeah. What are we as sinners called to do? But then there's the flip side of what are we as brothers and sisters called to do with the person that's sinning?
Yeah.
'Cause I think so many times when we do this conversation, where you hear, like, and the point is love covers all sin. Period.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes, and, like, there's more. We can't just stop there. And you did such a great job of, hey, this is part of it, but we can't stop here. There's more. Yeah. And so for us as believers, even the way that you walked out, our job as believers is not to call somebody out of sin and then send them on their way, but it's to walk with them.
Yeah.
Like, because it's so easy to say, hey, go and do this. Yeah. But it's like, hey, let me walk with you. Let me help you. Let me encourage you.
And it's so easy to just point out other people's sin.
Oh, yeah.
And that's what we kind of talked about that I was trying to hit in the beginning. Is like, man, if you're a parent, if you're a guardian of someone and you're listening to this and you didn't see the message, and this was one of the points that I feel like I kind of called out some people for. And I think it's a challenge to all of us is that parents, if your kids don't open up with what they're struggling with to you at all, it's because they know that you're going to shame them for what they did. There is no love in that.
Yeah.
And maybe the way you're reacting to it, you think is loving, but it isn't.
Yeah.
Because if it truly was loving and they could see Jesus' love through it, then they would not, they would be willing to open up to you. But the fact that they don't just shows how you think you're being loving, but you're really not. And that's what's crazy.
Because Nick's even talked about how parenthood isn't just a title. Like, mom and dad isn't just a title. Like, there's a role, but there's also responsibility. Yeah. And so, like, I'm even learning this with my oldest, Leighton, who's 3.5. There is the very easy domineering side of, like, dadhood, of being a father, is like, hey, you messed up. You made a mistake.
Yeah.
You need to not do that again. And here's all the reasons why. Don't talk back to me. I asked you to do something. Go do it. Period.
Yeah.
But it's like, and there are times for that, but at the same time, there's the place where when I mess up, I want my girls to see, because I'm modeling, hey, I'm sorry, daddy made a mistake. Yeah. Where it's not just this hierarchical.
And that's so good, because that's where it starts. Yep. And the example starts with them, you saying, hey, I screwed up, and I'm your dad. You're supposed to respect me, but here's the thing. I'm still a sinner. Yep. And you get to see that at a young, I mean, your kids are young. And as they see that, as they grow, that you're willing to open up about how you're messing up. Hey, I should not have yelled at you that way. Yep. I'm sorry. How can we work on our relationship so that doesn't happen again? Yeah. So then when they go and something happens and they mess up and they fall and they treat you wrong, they can immediately be like, hey, I should not have reacted that way. I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have done that. How can you help me not do that again?
Because it's so easy to be authoritative and to tell somebody to do something. Leighton, you need to stop doing that and don't do it again, and then walk away. But I also have to shepherd my daughter's heart. Like, I also have to get down on her level. Like, and I'll tell you right now, it's very easy for me to be authoritative. Yeah. That's just my personality, super aggressive. And so where there's been times where I have to walk back and be like, Leighton, come here. Yeah. Get her to sit in my lap while she's still losing it because daddy's just screamed at her. Yeah. Like, hey, I'm sorry. Do you understand why you can't do that? Mm-hmm. No. Okay, can daddy tell you? Like, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have yelled at you, but that made me nervous. Like, we had a situation the other day where she ran out in a parking lot away from us. And she's been told over and over again, like, hey, when you're in a parking lot, you can't run away.
Hold somebody's hand, whatever the case may be. Yeah.
It scared me more than it did anything. Yeah. But the way I reacted, because I was scared, is immediately scream at her, get out, stop. Like, because I don't know the idiot that's driving down and can't see her and smokes her. Exactly. All she did was crumble in tears. You know what I mean? She just freaked out. And I walked over and I picked her up and I said, hey, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have yelled at you, but you scared daddy. I don't ever want. And it's like so many times as parents, as guardians, as teachers, anything with an authoritative title, we allow that authoritativeness to take the lead instead of grace, compassion, understanding. Like there has to be that. But at the end of the day, there's a right way and a wrong way to do it. And so many times, especially like you see this in student ministry, I remember seeing it in student ministry, where all you have to do is build a relationship with a student and make that connection, and they just begin to open up.
Oh, yeah.
Because no one's ever treated them, not as an equal, because there's definitely a difference there, but no one's ever treated them just as a human being who makes mistakes. Like, I'm older than you. I've made mistakes. I'm not better than you. I just learned from my mistakes, where I want to help you learn from your mistakes.
And that's where transitioning into church, big C, the church, is we've done the same exact thing that happens on a family level. And I love that you said it's the fear.
Yep.
And I think that's the biggest thing is we get so scared of certain sins and we get so caught up in the fear of that thing happening that when someone falls into one of those sins that we don't know how to react. And that's when we crucify them. And that's something else I said is, why are we putting other people on the cross when Jesus already died on it?
Yeah.
Like,
come on.
We don't need to reuse the cross,
but
we do time and time again. And when somebody sins, instead of walking with them in love and walking out of the grave with them, because they've died to that self, they're a Christian, that is not them. That's their flesh coming through. Instead of walking out of the grave with them, we throw them back on the cross. Mm-hmm. But then we go on and say, yeah, but Jesus died for all our sins, ultimate sacrifice, but we don't act like it.
Yep.
And that's what sucks. And that's why so many people, and this is something else I said on Sunday, if you missed it, this is so good, is that's why nobody wants to be a part of the church, is because the shame and the guilt that is felt even by Christians from other Christians. Why would I ever want to be a part of a thing where I'm going to feel shame of my life 24/7, where I'm not going to feel welcome? I'm going to feel like everyone is judging me every second I'm there. You know? And honestly, it is a fair assumption. It is a fair representation of where the church is, especially in America right now.
And the hard part is, and I love that's why I loved how you ended your message, because the relational connectivity that comes from walking alongside somebody, not telling them to go and sin no more, because one, you're not Jesus, but to walk alongside, you are discipling them. You're hopefully modeling Christ's likeness to them. You are, when they want to and begin operating in their flesh and do the things that is natural to them, which is sin, specific to this one or couple things they're struggling with, you get to be the person that, because you've built a relationship with them, because you have that relational connectivity, you get to call them out of that in a loving, like-minded way, instead of in a condemning, condemnation kind of sort of way, where it's always from a I'm better than you situation. You need to stop doing this. But we would never want that same pressure on us if the tables were turned.
No.
We want to be the person pointing the finger, saying wrong is you for doing X, Y, and Z. But if the tables were turned, we wouldn't want somebody to do that to us.
Never.
We would want
Never.
all the grace and then some, you know? And so for you to walk that out was so, like, for me just sitting there, I just began rolling through my head, how many times have I sat in a place of condemnation towards somebody where, one, I would have never wanted that if the tables were turned.
Oh, no.
Or I think what I did was loving, but as I look back on it, the loving part is fleshed out when you walk with them.
Yes.
And if it's not walking with them, it's not loving.
And there needs to be both. In many situations, there needs to be both. There needs to be that hey, there's consequences to what you did. But now, how can I walk with you so that this doesn't happen again? How can I walk with you out of the shame and guilt that you're feeling right now? And then through that situation and continue walking. And I like that you said that earlier. It's like, how do we walk in love? It's continuous. It doesn't end when you think the sin is dealt with and over with. It doesn't end when you've resourced them and given them all these things so they don't fall back into it. It never ends. Walking in love means you're by their side no matter what. And you're like, hey, I got you. I'll be your accountability. I'll be that friend that you can always call now or in 5 years, you know? And that's what it really looks like, because you never know any little thing, especially in our society today, I was talking to Dayton about it earlier, is like our society and what's cool, the culture changes so quickly. And you never know when the culture is going to change and shift that may spark you back into an old sin.
Yep.
And if you're not walking by that person still, yeah, maybe they've been good for 4 or 5 years, but the culture shifts. And even now, we were talking about it earlier in here, is like you get on some social media and there's like softcore porn on, and that's totally fine, like acceptable in culture. And that could flip somebody back into something that they haven't dealt with in 5 years. They've been good and not even thought about it. And it's like, but you're not that support anymore. So they don't know who to turn to. They don't know where to go. And that's an extreme example. But the little things is like, you got to continue walking in love in order that they never fall back into that sin.
Yeah.
Like they're still going to struggle with other things, but you can be the person that's like, hey, I'm not going to let you fall back into that.
Yep.
You know, like I'm going to be here no matter what, which is really cool.
And the scary part is when that doesn't happen, what then begins to bloom in the church. And like you hit the nail on the head is this kind of judgmental attitude of we all in ministry have heard people say, I don't want to walk back into church because of how the church treated me. And there is definitely spiritual abuse. That again, like you said, that's a whole nother conversation.
Yeah. And there's a lot of valid things. And many of those people have very valid points because church hurt is real.
Yep.
But like I'm sure you were leading to is we have to remember that the church hurt is not God hurt.
Yep.
God is not the church, and we are all imperfect, sinful people, whereas God is perfect. Yep. He is always loving. He is merciful. He is righteous. And so when we get hurt by people, then we need to remember that's not God.
Yeah.
That's people.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah. And when you get to that point, what then the church looks like is judgmental, hypocritical, closed-minded, all of the negative things when you think about the church, instead of, you go flip it all the way to the other side where it's like, oh, they're a loving, gracious church. Yeah, but that doesn't mean that we're not going to call out sin. That doesn't mean that we're going to not preach the Bible. Like, we're going to preach those things. Yeah. But if we hit on something that is quote unquote a hot topic issue, not because we're trying to be relevant, it's because we have to address it.
Which is 50% of the Bible at this point. I mean, really.
90% of the, like anymore, everything is controversy or offensive, the Bible says, because it was in Jesus' day, and why would we expect any different in our day? But to walk out those things where so many times we operate out of fear because we don't know how to act.
Yeah.
Because we don't know what to do with that person, because we don't want to be condemning, but we don't want to be so gracious that we allow them to continue on in their sin.
Yeah.
We want to walk them out of sin and walk alongside them.
And I think there's such a fine line between what we talked about earlier, where you're not walking with them at all, you're condemning, and then you have this small sliver in the middle that is walking in love and how you do that. And then the certain parts of the church have even gone all the farther. And it's not walking in love. It's honestly just as bad as the far opposite side of condemning and shaming, is that there is no consequence to the sin. Yep. And what's so great and what's so good is that if you truly read your Bible and you look into the character of God, is that God is so gracious and he shows mercy time and time again. You look at even Noah's story. Yeah. God could have just wiped the whole earth and restarted with a new Adam and Eve. I mean, really, if he wanted to, he could have, but he didn't. He found that one righteous man, and out of however many people there were that time, he could have, rightfully so, just been like, no, there's only one out of however many, even 10, 20, 30 million, who knows how many at this time. There's probably a lot of people because it was growing at a rapid pace. I mean, look, Noah had 3 sons. If you look at you look at the lineages, a lot of these people had a lot of kids. Yep. And so there was probably a lot of people on earth that got wiped out, and God righteously could have wiped out everyone, but he did both. He showed mercy to human race by giving Noah this word from God saying, hey, you need to build this, and telling him, build this ark. He showed mercy, and he said, bring your family, and it saved our whole, we wouldn't be here I mean, the whole way of the world would have been completely different if he just wiped it and restarted. But he showed mercy, but he also was still righteous, and there was consequences. The world was full of sin, and there was only one righteous person, and everybody else got wiped out. And that was the righteous act of God.
Yeah.
And that might be hard for you to juggle. It's like, man, how was that right that he just took everybody out? But then you can look at the flip side and see the mercy and the grace that he showed Noah and his family. Or even we're talking about going out of Egypt, where even when I mentioned this on Sunday, is they're coming out of Egypt as slaves, that one, he gives them a way out by all these plagues. Yep. And that first is just like, man, that's God showing up. He's not letting you be in bondage anymore. He gives you a way across the river. He parts the sea and gives you a way across. And then Moses goes up to get the 10 Commandments and get the tablets from God, and you turn your back on him again.
Yeah.
After he just rescued you, you turn your back and you worship this golden calf, and he still spares you and shows mercy and grace. But he also, in that situation, did show some just anger, and he did take care of his business, but he showed so much mercy in that, like, hey, you are still my people. I still have a plan for you, and through you that I'm going to redeem everyone, which is so cool. And that's our life today, is that we mess up. We turn away from Jesus so many times. We worship so many things. We're not worshiping probably a golden calf that we've built.
Maybe you're sitting in your room and there's a golden,
and maybe, or we're worshiping our phone or technology or something that's man-made. And we worship that instead of him, and we give that our time and our money and our influence and all this stuff. And God is righteous and has all the right in the world to zap whatever we're worshiping and be like, no, look, this is me. But he shows so much mercy that we can sin and mess up, but he still came and he still sent his son for us. And that's what we talked about, and how we tied in the love covers all sin with John 3:17. 16 says, for God so loved the world that he sent his only son, that whoever believes in him shall have eternal life. But then it says, for God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but in order that the world might be saved through him. And that's what we're offered every single day, continuously, is that we're not condemned for what we've done because it's been paid for by the blood. But he came to save us. And so we don't have to live in condemnation of what we've done. Yeah. But we also can't forget that condemnation and can't forget the consequences and go too far and just be like, do whatever you want. Yeah. You're going to heaven. It doesn't matter. Yep. Because then you get into this lifestyle and this culture where it's like, okay, just do as it's seen right in your eyes. And that's where it gets scary, is like in the Bible when it says like everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And that's when the Tower of Babel, and he split up and made everybody speak different languages because they needed to be parted, because they were not looking to God. They were looking at their own wisdom. Yeah. And we're slowly getting back to that point, but
yeah. Is there something from your message on Sunday, some point you wish you could have drawn out a little bit longer, but because of time constraints, because of it wouldn't have been appropriate in the room, you couldn't do it? Is there anything from your message, like, 'cause you're probably like, man, I wish I could have like hammered, almost like in life group, like kind of anything's on the table in life group. Was there anything as you were sitting down that the Lord was moving and stirring, like, oh, I wish I could say that, but if I say that, it could come across the wrong way. I don't have time to explain myself.
Or like, man, it doesn't go with the main points. It's just a little tangent, and I'm not going to pull a Nick.
I really want to say that.
I'm not going to pull a Nick and go 20 minutes. No. Nick's great. Nick's great that he's able to reel it back in. And I don't think if I would have went off on some certain
you've been on a tangent down a road.
And then the last point would have been forgotten. But I think the biggest thing, and I was telling Dayton this earlier, is because even this morning as I was coming in, I was listening to some music. And one of the songs I'm listening to this morning, it just came out a couple weeks ago, and I'm huge into Christian rap, like CHH.
Huge.
Christian, huge. Like, we're in staff meeting, and my phone went off, and it was just like the beat was about to drop.
Hold on. What was the name of the song?
What was the name of the song? It was what was? Oh yeah, You're Gonna Get Jumped Tonight or something like that. But
sorry, continue.
The beat was just going hard, and this guy I'm listening to, his name's Marty. He's from Social Club Misfits. Great guys. but his song's called Christian Rapper, and it just came out. And the hook in the song is that basically, I'm not a copy of your favorite rapper. I'm just me. And so many times our culture is trying to be something else. And as Christians, we're always trying to replicate, especially in the creative world, what the world is doing.
Yep.
And I was telling Dayton this earlier, is Sunday, the point and that we were talking about was like walking backwards. So the two brothers walk backwards and cover Noah up to not give him any more shame. And if we're walking backwards away from the flow, we're called to be different. Is basically what I was going into. Is we're little Christ. We're supposed to be we're supposed to follow in his footsteps, not in the world's.
Yep.
And so it's so sad to see how the world has changed. Whereas you're sitting in history class and you're looking at, I just got done with college a couple months ago, and I was in history class in that last semester there, and we're talking about, and all the people that were leading the creative world, even a couple hundred years ago, were Christians. They were leading, they were the top people that everyone else was striving to copy and to be like, were these people that were doing art, doing music, all these things, theater. And now it's switched where we've allowed the world and the culture to lead the way. And now we're copying the world to try to be, and we need to take it back almost. And it's not like take anything from them, but it's, we need to have quality in everything we do. We need to do it with the best that we have. We can't praise, I think sometimes because people are Christians, if they come out with a product, whether it's music or literal, like something you can buy, we all get behind it because, oh, it's a Christian person and they're doing this. If something's trash, say it's trash. I mean,
call it what
that's
it is.
That's as easy as it. I mean, like literally, like we can't praise trash creativeness just because they're a Christian. And what it's become is that now everybody's just trying to copy the world because that's the standard. And now we're praising people for literally just knocking off what anyone in the world's doing.
Yeah.
And that's not walking backwards. That's walking into the world and just taking from them.
Yep.
And when we walk backwards and when we truly as a generation, I think, turn that way and start walking our own way, I think that's where we'll see the next generation who I've seen some people embracing that and like, hey, I'm my own person. I'm not a copy of the world. They start blowing up because even the world sees like, hey, they're different. And hey, they're doing something cool that no one else is doing.
It's very different.
And it's so cool. There's this great guy, his name's Henrik, that I know. Actually, my roommate from college went to youth group with him, which is so cool. He's 1 year younger than me. And he was doing Christian rap, and he kind of had that punk rock rap kind of sound. And finally, I think he just gave in to what God was calling him to do. He started doing folk music, but like Christian folk music. And he has more monthly listeners on Spotify now than any Christian rapper. Lecrae, KB, Andy Mineo, he's blown them all out of the water just by doing what God had called him to do from the beginning. But he was trying to fit that style that he thought people would like or that would get the most views. And finally he stepped out of that and did what God was calling him. And God's, showing him like, hey, you're following my will, and I'm showing you like, hey, that's his confirmation. Yes. And it's so cool to see that is like, when we step into the bounds of what God's calling us to do, I think some crazy things can happen. But to get back to like that walking backwards, being different, I think that's one of the hardest things to do as a Christian because it is so easy to what I kind of think of as like a lazy river. Wherever you go,
get in, put your feet up.
You get in a lazy river. It's so easy to get in and to put your feet up and just ride the wave. But sometimes there's little offshoots off the lazy river, maybe booths or something. And maybe one of your friends goes in it and you're pushed past already and you're trudging upstream trying to get into it. I think Big Surf has that little area. If you go past, it's hard to get back up in there. You got to put effort into it. But I think that's our relationship here. Like that's what we need to be doing is if life is so easy that you're not putting effort into being different, then you're not being different. There is no different.
And the thing, how do I do this without?
No, just say it.
No, without revealing too much. So in a couple weeks, I'm preaching, and so some of what I've wanted to pull from is like what you're talking about requires faith.
Yeah.
And so we're going to see when we get to Abraham the faith that is required, that the Lord calls Abraham to do something, but doesn't give him the full scope.
Oh, so you get Abraham. Yeah, that's what you get when you're given to teach. I get Noah naked. And
I will say, when Nick and I were talking about it, it was like, hey, Z's teaching. I was like, oh, cool. What passage is he, like, is he going to go off? He's like, no, he's going to preach this. Like, oh, awesome. Let's go. Like, what's he teaching? He's like, Noah's nakedness. And I was like, ooh, glad that's not me. I'm making sure that
I should have traded, man. I should have offered up. I've been like, I'll trade you this, and I'll give you 3 Sundays off hosting for your passage, please.
That's what I see. You're preaching. That'd be great.
I'll see your message, and I'll raise you 3 Sundays not hosting.
Whatever I can do to get out of it. No, like, in all honesty, we heard so many people say that was such a great message. And Nick even said on Sunday morning, I think we all, because we're not the guy, anytime, like, I've been very open about this. I hate preaching. It makes me the most nervous ever. Don't feel qualified,
which is
whatever.
So funny.
It's like, we're not talking about that.
Funny. I mean, if we look at the past here, like, you would get booked to teach at our youth camps. Like, you were booked for a youth camp just to come and teach.
I know,
which is so funny.
But Nick got up. He said it in our pre-service prayer, and then I appreciate he got up and even said to the church, like, hey, somebody, a pastor once said to him, you're not junior. Like, you are the guy that God has called and has given a word. And man, that was so evident and so true on Sunday. And this is the hard part, not to, like, toot your own horn or make you feel good about yourself, but, like, it isn't because of you. Like, I saw the work you did behind the scenes. I saw the amount of study and prayer that went into it. But when you talk about doing what the Lord has called you to do, when you step into that, and you step into that in faith, you will be walking against the norm, or you will be walking up the stream, and it will feel so awkward and so hard and so uncomfortable. But I always, so you talked about Big Surf, you know? So, like, I worked at Big Surf for many years.
I'm sorry.
And so it was actually great. I get paid to tan.
You get paid to tan.
It was
except
awesome.
You got to deal with all the kids. That's the only.
Yeah. So, like, take the lazy river. There's jets in the lazy river that keep that water moving. And if you get
you
out,
want that water moving.
That's exactly
you
right.
don't know what's in that water.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Keep it flowing. Keep it flowing.
Keep the flow going.
But if you stop, if you were to get out and try to walk by yourself, it's really awkward, because what you're seeing people come towards you and go past you. But then if you have a friend get out and come with you, and then another friend and another friend, like, that community that's built, that walking out together, that doesn't necessarily make walking against the current any easier. It's still hard to walk against the current. But when you see other people living out a life like you're not the only one, you're not the only person walking against the current or going against the flow, it in a mental way does make it easier, where it's like, I'm not lone wolfing this. I am doing something that is hard and it's uncomfortable, but there's my brother, sister right there. And I know that person I can lean on, because when my legs get tired, when I want to give up and I just want to lift my feet up, take a breath and just glide down with everybody else, because that's the easy thing to do. I look over, and there's so-and-so. I look to my right. I look to my left. There's all those people around me. And I think what we've lost is, I think right now there's a lot of people that feel like they're lone wolfing it. Because everybody else has tried to copy the world, or do what the world is doing, or do the Christian or diet version of what the world is, because that's what's selling. And it's like, no, do what God has called you to do. You want to do something crazy and audacious that requires faith? Don't stand on your mountaintop in a good spot and call somebody else out of their sin. Get down in the mud and the mire and the clay and the messiness of it.
It's going to get dirty.
Like, and walk with them. Hey, like, give me your hand. I'm going to get dirty. Like, let's go. We're going to do this together.
That's the hard thing to do. That's the thing that requires putting in work. Calling people out requires nothing other than you basically just saying, like, hey, do you see this person? But, like, when you get down and get dirty with them, that's what requires putting in work, putting in time and effort. And that's what truly shows you care for someone. I love, you were talking about, Nick said, like, hey, you're not the JV. You're not the second hand. You're God's guy for today. And jokingly all week, my girlfriend was in town, and she'd always be like, oh, are you nervous about Sunday? Are you nervous about Sunday? Well, hey, it's my day off. I was like, that's a Sunday problem. And that was jokingly. But realistically, I had put the work in on the back end.
Yep.
And I know what God had called me to do. And I mentioned this on Sunday is like, the reason I taught on this is because God was challenging me with this thing. And how do I walk with our students in the same way? How when they open up, like you said, you build that relationship with students and they start opening up like nobody's business because they finally have a relationship where they feel seen, they feel heard, which they might not have at home or even at school because maybe their friends at school aren't Christians and won't understand.
Yep.
And so they have that relationship and they start opening up like, hey, I'm struggling with this. I'm struggling with this. Well, how do I then walk with them in love and walk with them continuously so that they don't fall into that over and over and over again? And so that's what I was challenged with. And so not arrogantly, but I was prepared. I knew God had put this on my heart. So I really wasn't stressing about Sunday. And even Sunday morning, I woke up and I went and said hi to my girlfriend before I left. And she's like, oh, are you nervous? And I'm like, oh, that's for when I get on stage. I can be nervous. And there was about 2 minutes there, first service, where I was a little like, oh, man. But then, even just Nick reminding me and then even saying it again on stage, like, no, you're the person God's called. This is the message he's given you. Like, he gave you a word.
Yep.
And now it's your job to give it to everyone else. And so, like, I think that brought in some confidence that I didn't have before and haven't had before. And what's so cool is we were in life group on Sunday night. We do our college age life group. And Maddie, one of my life group leaders from middle school this past year, she was like, it was so cool because it just felt like we were upstairs with the middle schoolers again. She's like, it was so cool. It wasn't any different. It wasn't crazy different. It was just a bigger crowd, and it was like, you were confident. And even like some people came up to me and was like, my dad, who hasn't seen me preach in, a couple years from when, maybe I was teaching like right out of high school and stuff. And he's like, the improvement is awesome. I didn't hear any I didn't hear any, and those things. And even like, some of my other leaders came up and they're like, I think you preached more confidently than you ever did on a Wednesday night. You were more, and I'm like, and it really was like that confidence that like knowing like, okay, God has given me this moment. He's ordained Pastor Nick. He's put his stamp on him, and Nick has then given me this mission to, hey, this is you're up. And so, jokingly, we joked like, hey, he was joking about being the A team. And I'm like, I don't know what he's talking about. I'm the A team. You just always get the B team. But those jokes come out of like, hey, I am confident of what God's given me to teach. And there is a word in here that people need to hear. And it was so cool. I had a ton of people come up to me in between services, but this one person came up to me and was like, hey, you calling out the family thing? Like, that's what I need to hear. I was mad at somebody in my family coming in this morning. I was so upset, but like, you called that out and you pointed me out. She's like, in front of everybody, and she's like, you really had to do that to me. But it's like, no, we got to start with the family. And that's where, if we can love our family well, which is sometimes the hardest to do because we know all their faults. We know a lot of how they mess up because we see it every day. We see them yelling at us or we see them getting mad and how they react and stuff. But if we can start walking in love in the family, how much easier is it going to be with our best friends that we only see the good side because we only hang out with them? Or those people at school that, hey, we only see the one side because we don't see them when they're at home. Like, how much easier is it to show God's love and walk in love with those people that we don't have to spend 24 hours a day, And so, I just think that's cool. It's really cool, and it was a newfound, what's the word? Like not hope. It was a newfound like solidarity and like what God had for me at that moment, at that time. Like, hey, I've put you here. Now go do what I've called you to do, which was so cool.
Yeah. Cool. Is there, let's wrap up with this. Is there something for those that are listening or watching, like, what is one thing you wish that you could challenge or say to anyone listening right now?
I think the biggest challenge is that if there is somebody who you have shamed for something they've done, is to step out of your comfort zone and meet them where they're at. And that's where it starts with, is with you recognizing, hey, I should not have reacted that way. Hey, I'm sorry that I shamed you in front of everybody. Hey, I'm sorry that I called you out. I put you on that cross, but Jesus was already on it. So I apologize. I should not have done that. And they might not accept your apology because you might have hurt them really bad. But it starts with you getting down into that into the mud with them and saying, hey, I messed up. Would you let me walk with you in love out of this sin, out of this situation, and into new life? And so like that's what I challenge you with, whether it's a sibling, whether it's a kid, whether it's you with your parent and your relationship's broken, or you with your kid, whether it's friends or old friends, even if it's something that's not super recent, like, I would encourage you, like, man, allow God to put something on your heart. Pray like, God, where have I done this? And where can I step up and be the bigger person and apologize for how I treated them? And when we walk in love, when we choose to do that, that's when the world will see the different side of us as Christians. And when they see us walking united in love, and that's something I said on Sunday, is the disunity that comes from shame and guilt is why people don't want the church. They want something, being a unified front, the body together is what makes a difference. And when they see us unified, walking together as the body of believers, that's when we can be a true example of Christ to the world. And so that's what I challenge. The one thing that I would challenge is like, start with yourself. Start with where you've messed up, accusing someone else. Don't wait for them to come to you. Apologize to them. Be the bigger person. Get down and say, hey, I screwed up. That's on me. I should never react that way. I should never have called you out like that in front of everybody. I should never have said that about you behind your back that you don't even know about. Like, I shouldn't have told people you were struggling with this, but I did. Hey, how can I help you walk out of this and never deal with that again?
Whew. That's a good word.
Yeah.
That's a good word. Dude, I'm proud of you. It's been fun to watch you grow. You did a great job Sunday. Thanks for sitting down. Thanks for this is not a normal hour-ish of your life that you have scheduled in. So when it's like, hey, you're preaching, don't forget, you have to do the breakdown too. So
I was pumped though.
Were you?
I've been waiting for my invite to the breakdown and it hasn't come.
Why is everybody? I mean, this is like some exclusive club that everybody is like, I want to be in the room.
You're on staff here. I mean, Taylor and London got their chance. Dayton's been on here. Even Ashley got on before I did.
I'm trying to find ways to roll off.
Well, I'll roll right on. You allow me to step into that. But no, I think this is really good. And as I've told Dayton, is like, hey, this podcast thing, it's a big deal. People listen to this, and across the world, podcasts have become kind of a thing again. And it's like, okay, how do I use this medium to reach students now? And that's what we've been thinking about. And I think this is great to show, like, hey, I can't talk on a mic to somebody for
it's not as scary
a good
as you
amount
think.
of time. It's not. And I think it's great. Like we said, we do have that chemistry that we've already built. But it's been great. Thank you for having me on.
Dude, thanks for being on.
Letting me come on. I was really excited to do it. I've been waiting all weekend.
Well, you'll have to. You did so good. We'll have to do it again. Maybe next week I roll off and you just become the new host.
Or maybe when you preach.
Oh.
Well, here's the thing. There's some opportunity coming up where we could do this again.
I like how you're
There's some opportunity.
Here.
You might see me again if I'm allowed. Hopefully I didn't say anything too outlandish. I did say
we'll have Nick listen to it.
I did call out the culture. I did call out
a lot. We'll see.
So might not be allowed back on.
That's okay. No, it was great. Seriously, thanks for being on. Thank you guys for listening and or watching. If you haven't had a chance to listen to Z's message, make sure you head to the website, ccloto.org/sermons. You can see his message there. Yeah. Just look for
It's 29 minutes on the dot. So if you got a short car trip, I looked at it on YouTube last night, you can fit it in.
Listen, I know Nick's going to listen to this, so I'll say this publicly here and privately to him. He thinks he's going to take the extra time that you didn't
He did say that.
He did say that.
Strap in next week.
So it'll be interesting to strap in. We'll see. So thanks, guys, for listening. Thanks for watching. We'll see you. We have housekeeping things. We don't have the breakdown.
We almost forgot. We were going to say it at the beginning and then.
Forgot to say it
there will be no breakdown next week.
Why?
Why? Because the staff is going to be enjoying some well-earned days off.
Why?
Flexed from Adventure Week. Yep. We worked hard that whole week. We worked our normal hours and Adventure Week on top of it. So the staff is taking a couple days off paired with the holiday. So we'll miss you out. You'll miss out on the breakdown next week.
So you'll have to wait 2 weeks.
But then we'll jump back in, hitting with the breakdown.
That'll be great.
And we really appreciate you guys listening. There's a faithful crew that jumps on and listens.
Sometimes slightly crazy. Can we say that? Just sometimes slightly crazy. But we love you guys anyways.
But I think it's really awesome. The breakdown has reached so many people and that so many people appreciate just digging deeper. And I think anytime we offer that opportunity, it's so good because people want more.
Yep.
And those people, when we fill that void it allows them to grow in their relationship with God more.
Love it. Well, that's it for us. We're out. Z's got important things to do.
Yeah.
I'm going to go do something.
Something.
So thanks, guys, for listening and watching. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks.